All right, so first we're going to start off with some of the most common issues inside of C Sharp. All right, I'm going to be going over script names, semicolons, spelling mistakes, variable types, unassigned references, command order, and some of my advice on these things. All right, so let's dive in and let me show you some of these challenges. All right, so here I am right now inside of Unity, and I'm actually going to start off by creating just an empty game object here. This is just going to be holding our scripts here. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to right click here at the bottom, and we're going to create just an empty C# script for testing and training. All right, so training, there we go. I'll just call this training here. Okay, so let's start off with the first item, which is script names. And so many times you're writing a script and sometimes you decide to rename it. All right, this is a common thing that happens inside of Unity, and it's a very simple thing to get wrong. So you see the word here, it's called training with a capital T. I'm going to change this to a lowercase t. All right, this is going to throw a problem within Unity itself, because over here we've actually got the word training with a capital T. And so now Unity is actually going to be trying to look for this thing. But if your script name inside of what you've got here in Unity is off, even by a character, uppercase, lowercase, if it's off by the naming itself, you will have compiler issues. All right. So generally that's how it works. I'm going to just show you here. I'm going to try and take this guy here. I'm going to click and drag it over here, and you're going to see this error. And this error says the script don't inherit a native class that can manage a script. All right. You're going to be very confused with this, and you can say, what is going on? Literally, this is actually a very vague message, but literally what happened was your script name is not the same as what's actually in your script itself for the class name. So the class name here is training with a capital T, all right? And what you've named it here, the actual file name, is training with a lowercase t, all right? Very simple to make this mistake, but it can be a hard one, something that takes a lot of time to find, right? So now if I just change this back to regular, capital T, as you can see at the bottom right, it's compiling, and now everything is fine. I can just click and drag this in, and it's completely fine, all right? Very simple mistake to make, but this is just one of the common errors that you will find. Okay, so now this next one is actually the most common one amongst all developers in the world. This is the number one, I would say the number one common error that we all fall into this trap, and that is the semicolon, the notorious semicolon. All right, there are so many times that you have, script errors, that you forgot to add a semicolon to the end, right? So for example, integer int n test is equal to 5. And oh my goodness, I forgot a semicolon, right? Now, if I don't have that there, it's going to yell at me here. Now, of course, right now, visually, it's very easy for me to catch this right now because there's only, one line of code. But imagine in most common codes, we've got about 1,000 lines or 2,000 lines of code. A semicolon is very easy to miss. One of the ways that I actually try and, find these things is I'll actually look here in Visual Studio. I'll look for the reds, right? So if you could see there's this little red box over there on the right side, and that alerts me that there is an issue right there. And it even kind of points it out. If you kind of see that right there on the right side, okay. I'm like trying to point there to the right, my apologies. But yeah, it's like right here, just follow that line. There's a little red square on the right side. And that helps me to find this a little bit faster, okay? So the second common error is a spelling mistake, all right? So for example, over here, if I just do this all lowercase, what will end up happening is even though it's the same characters, it's going to throw an error, all right? Other times it could be as simple as something like this, right? And as you can see here, this is very common, right? Where you will actually have characters that you've, by mistake, kind of like flip-flopped around or mixed up. That is something that happens all the time. And then you're wondering, well, what's going on? And so what generally happens is you want to kind of always check to see, did I name this correctly? What's going on? Because sometimes you'll see an error and everything looks fine, right? But it's like, it was just off by a couple of characters, just like, for example, this SE and test, right? You wouldn't realize that, especially if it's a word that is common and it can be a very simple error, but a very confusing one at times. All right, so just keep that in mind, especially when you're reading a lot of code. All right. All right, so the next one is variable types. Okay, there's so many different types of variables that you can have. One of the most dangerous things, in my opinion, is using the word var. And here's the reason why. Var is like a catch-all type of variable. It was from the Java days, and Unity actually had 3 different languages inside of it. It had Boo, which if you've never heard of this, then fine, that's good. But Boo was there. It was a fun little language that was there. I didn't learn too much of it. I stuck to either Java or C Sharp. But inside of Unity, you can actually do Java code. All right, that is something that everyone who's starting out, they just think it's all C Sharp. You can actually do Java things inside of there. And of course, var is also in C Sharp as well. But I would actually, stay away from vars, because I can actually put in var and test, variable, and I would actually put in, let's say, 0. All right. Well, I haven't defined a type. What the compiler does is it guesses the type, and so this is great for like scripting languages like PHP, for example. You would have this sort of stuff. But inside of C Sharp, when you're doing this, especially when you're doing any form of coding, you definitely need to know the type, especially in game development, because there's so many times that you're going to have something that's not an integer or some other thing, but you're doing a lot of conversions from one type to another, right? So many times you want to go from an integer to a float. Okay, and if I don't understand what this is, I can very easily make a mistake, right? And so here, I'll just show you here. End test variable is equal to hello, right? Well, because I'm not sure what this is, it's a bit harder, right? As you can see, it's like, oh, okay, I don't know that this is an int. And if I hover over this here, right, you see it's picked up that it's an int, all right? Only because I put that there. But let's say I put this here, right? Now it's a floating point variable. When I hover over it, it is detected that it's a float, all right? But if I actually, name this, and usually I have naming conventions, I'll go over that in just a bit. But I would think that this is an int value, but it turns out it's a float value. I would be confused because if I go to the definition over here, it's showing me it's a var. So always, always, always use the type that you are going to be, using for that variable. Always use the type when you're defining it. All right, so very important thing. So over here, I would have defined this as a float if it was a floating point, a string if it was a string, and so on. All right, coming to the next item, which is a common thing, is naming conventions. Many times people do very silly things in code, and it's fine if you are just the only developer, but I would never recommend to anybody to develop with the mentality that you're the only developer in the world. Okay, always, always, always have descriptive variable names. All right, so as you can see here, I've got n lowercase test variable. Okay, now over here, this is the floating points. I would actually change this to the letter F. At the very beginning, I would actually put what this thing is so I can recognize it. All right, that's what we call a naming convention. Generally, every company has their own, every coding team has their own, but I find that having something is better than nothing. Okay, the worst types of namings you could do is float m equals 5.0f. What is m? How do I even know what that is, right? Unless I'm doing some form of scientific app where m is actually one of those types of values, you would never name anything m, for example, right? So it doesn't make sense. You want to be descriptive with your naming. And if you're not, what will happen is it will become very hard to read and understand your own script. And what's worse is that you may have written the script, but 3 months down the line, 5 months down the line, you'll come back to it and you won't remember a thing. You'll be like, what is this? I don't even know what's going on.